it's time to react to the predictions I made at the start of the season. Let's go.
We'll start off with the Premier League table, and in 20th, I'm going to go with Bournemouth.
Yeah, I'm not the only one who did this, to be fair. I mean, Bournemouth posted a video about it on their social media when they were confirmed to stay up, with all the content creators that are predicting them to finish either last or at the very, very highest, get relegated, maybe 18th or 19th. So yeah, fair play to them. They've made a right mug of us all.
I think their squad is championship level. I don't think it's a Premier League quality squad.
I do still stand by that in a way. I think the squad has performed greater than the sum of its parts, in fairness. And Gary O'Neill, I mean, what a fantastic job he's done, especially in the second half of the season after admittedly a tough start to his regime, and of course that 9-0 calamity at the hands of Liverpool, which saw Scott Parker sacked after just 4 games of the season. Obviously went on record saying that the squad wasn't good enough and that he hadn't been backed well enough by the owners. But fair play to Gary O'Neill, he's turned it around, helped them finish in 15th, and yeah, as I say, outperformed, I'd say, the quality of the squad.
As will Scott Parker, considering his last season in the Premier League was relegation with Fulham.
And now he's been sacked twice by 2 different clubs in one season, and his managerial career lies in tatters.
In 19th place is my first bold call of the video. It's going to be Southampton.
I mean, I'm very happy with this one. Southampton to go down. How about that? I mean, obviously I didn't get the placement right. I got them 1 place off. They finished dead last rather than 19th. But I saw a season of struggle for them. I just thought that even with the players they'd recruited, yes, they were really good with potential rather than the immediate here and now. But I think I saw a stat where Gavin Bazunu had conceded 15 more goals or 16 more goals than he was actually expected to have conceded over the course of the season. And when you have a goalkeeper that underperforms that spectacularly, it doesn't bode well. Overall, it's been a pretty lackluster and poor season by Southampton. I mean, Nathan Jones's tenure in charge is arguably one of the worst in Premier League history, if not the worst, considering the ramifications of it. And Ruben Sayers just couldn't improve the squad that much when he came in as interim manager. Yes, they've got a good foundation. I think they will be in a very good position to bounce straight back up to the Premier League next season because of the squad that they had and the players they recruited over the summer. But if anything, I think those players needed a season in the Championship rather than a season in the Premier League to get that experience of first team football, improve as players, and then kick on. So we'll have to wait and see how well they do in the Championship next season, but their 11-year stay in the Premier League is over, as I predicted, which I'm very pleased with.
It'll either be a case, I think, of Hasenhüttl just stays on for way too long and eventually the Saints are just unsalvageable by the time he departs, or he leaves early on in the campaign and someone else comes in to steer them to safety.
It was kind of a mixture of the two, to be honest. Hasenhüttl left quite early, and then someone else came in and sunk the ship rather than steered them to safety. So, yeah, that was I basically got everything right, just not said correctly, if that makes any sense, which it probably doesn't, but oh well.
In 18th place, and the final team to be relegated, it pains me to say it, but I'm going with Nottingham Forest.
Again, this isn't really a stupid call. I don't think it is. I mean, the number of players that they recruited, they basically recruited 2 new squads over the summer. But eventually, Steve Cooper, they kept the faith in him, which is so important. I think if they had sacked him, they would have gone down. I don't think anyone else but Steve Cooper could have kept this side up. He managed to gel them all together. As you would expect, some of the signings just didn't work out. Jesse Lingard, perhaps the most notable of them, barely making any impact whatsoever. But I say Gibbs White, Awoniyi, fantastic additions, and might even keep Nottingham Forest in the Premier League next season. They just have to make sure that that curse of second season syndrome doesn't strike them hard. And probably I don't think they need to recruit any more, or at least not as extensively as they did last summer, but a couple of additions here and there would be pretty important. But then again, they did have Keylor Navas on loan for the second half of the season, which still blows my mind that that even happened. Also, just before I continue on any further, I'm using like a scoring system whereby the number of places that the team is away from where I actually predicted them is the number of points I get. I try to get as few points as I physically can, so Bournemouth are 5 places away from where I predicted them, so I get 5 points for that. Southampton were 1 place away from where I predicted them, so I get 1 point for that. And Nottingham Forest were 2 places away, so I get 2 points. So as I say, I'm trying to get as few points as I possibly can. My record is 68, and last season I got 70, I believe. So those are the targets I've got to try and beat. I'm on 8 at the moment. Let's keep it going.
In 17th place, just outside the relegation zone, I'm going with Leeds.
They nearly had it. They were there. They were outside the drop, and then, I mean, April happened. 23 goals conceded. in the whole month. 78 goals conceded over the course of the entire season. Jesse Marsch basically living on borrowed time since January, well, from December to January or February, whenever he was sacked. Javi Gracia overseeing one of the worst months in Premier League history in April, as I said. And then Big Sam, for some stupid reason, despite the fact that his relegation saviour status was well and truly in the back seat after his relegation with West Brom. And then he has the audacity to say, oh, I'm as footballing smart as Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola or whatever, or it's disappointing that Leeds are relegated. No, it's not. You got paid 500 grand. I don't think you care about Leeds in the slightest, but you know, that's just Big Sam for you. I'm not a fan of him at all. I'm so glad he's been relegated again, and I hope I never have to see him in the Premier League ever again. And yeah, Leeds are relegated. They finished 19th, so 2 places off with that one. It was deserved, let's be real.
Could be wrong, of course, and this prediction could look very foolish in 9 months' time for both good and bad reasons.
Yeah, I was proven wrong for the bad reasons, so at least I had that little caveat added in, just to be safe.
16th place, I'm going to go with the only newly promoted team that I haven't featured yet, and that is Fulham.
Wow, that's a long way off. That's a very long way off. I think it's 6 places. They finished in 10th, perfectly ensconced in mid-table, and at the start of the season, especially up until about February or March, it looked like they might really stand a good chance of qualifying for Europe. And then, well, that FA Cup game with Man United happened. Mitrovic pushed a referee, got banned for 8 games, and their season collapsed completely. But still, I don't think that any Fulham fan would begrudge the fact that they finished 10th and have a second successive season in the Premier League for the first time since, well, in 10 years. Yes, it could feel like a bit of a missed opportunity considering the start that they had, but again, they've done brilliantly this season. Marcus Silva has really got that team going. The likes of Kenny Tete, Tim Ream in defence, Joao Palhinha in midfield. One of my favourite players to watch this season. I have a penchant for defensive midfielders. I don't know why. And he is just a phenomenon in the centre of the park. And one of the big reasons why Fulham had a push for Europe, which ultimately fell short at the last little hurdle. Of course, Bernd Leno as well, completely forgot about him. He saved, I think it was like 11 goals more than he was meant to save. It's according to expected goals saved or whatever the stat is. Again, Fulham's recruitment this year was just phenomenal. Palhinha and Leno, especially Willian as well, fantastic additions to their team and helped them finish in a very, very respectable 10th place.
15th place, I'm going to go with Brentford.
Another team I was 6 places off with. Brentford, what a phenomenal season they had in European contention until the final day, of course. Powered most significantly by the goals of Ivan Toney, who will be such a huge loss for them in the first half of next season, considering he serves an 8-month ban for his gambling addiction, basically, and all the betting infringements he's been charged with and ultimately found guilty of, for want of a better word. But yeah, Thomas Frank, what a job he's doing, melding that team together. The likes of Ben Mee in defence, one of the signings of the season, one of the players of the season as well, unquestionably. They are doing phenomenally well, punching very highly above their weight, but it speaks volumes that if you get the recruitment right and you know what you're doing in that sense, you're going to go places. You're going to end up in the top half of the Premier League on merit, and that's exactly what Brentford have done. Fantastic season for them.
But second season syndrome is definitely a thing, and Brentford have to be wary of that.
I think that does make sense. Second season syndrome is obviously a huge thing, and that was why I was a bit more cautious in my prediction with Brentford. I was like, I didn't want to go too high for them because there is that second season syndrome thing lingering over them, and I just didn't want to, push it too far and maybe put them in like 11th or 10th in case that spectacularly backfired. So I was a bit more cautious and put them in 15th as a result. But again, they've superseded my expectations, probably superseded Brentford fans' expectations as well, and done very well for themselves.
The team I've put in 14th place will experience a little bit of a drop-off in standards from last year, but I'm going to go with Brighton.
They're in Europe. They're in Europe. Experience a drop-off in standards from last year. They're in Europe. I hope that this is my worst prediction in the video. What a season they've had. Like, their recruitment policy is just spectacular. They sign players who no one's ever heard of, and within 3 weeks they do something incredible and they're worth £50 million just like that. They barely have any misfires right now, and it's pushed them way beyond anything that they could have ever imagined at the start of the season. Roberto De Zerbi I would argue, probably the manager of the season. Like, the job that he did at Brighton, yes, of course, the foundations were laid for him by Graham Potter, of course, but to take that squad and to transform them into a goal-scoring machine, they scored more than 70 goals in the league this season, and to make them a European team, and a European team on merit, it's quite simply remarkable, and I'm so looking forward to seeing how well they do next season, especially in the Europa League.
They obviously finished in 9th last time out, which is their best ever league finish in their entire history, which does give an indication that Graham Potter's project, is finally clicking into gear.
I should have listened to that. Like, I literally said it, that the project was clicking into gear, albeit it wasn't Potter's project by the end of it, considering he went to Chelsea, and look how well that turned out, but the project was clicking into gear. They finished in 9th the previous season, and now they finished 6th. Just, why do I not listen to what I'm saying sometimes?
One place higher than Brighton, I've put Everton.
One place higher than Brighton is Everton. 11 places lower than Brighton, in reality, is Everton. What a car crash. What an absolute car crash. It's the second year in a row that they've been in a relegation battle and basically been in one right up until either the penultimate or final match day, in this case the final match day. The fact that Everton are in this position is an indication of just how poor the board is right now and how incapable they are of managing Everton Football Club with the recruitment that they've made, the managers they've appointed. Yes, admittedly, Sean Dyche was ultimately just about a good managerial appointment and kept them up, but like, it's one of the very few good decisions that they've actually made over the last few years. So long as that board remain in charge, I don't see Everton progressing anywhere. And with that new stadium that they have on the horizon, which I believe they're moving into in 2024, if they suffer relegation next season, that will be the most damning indictment on the board and indeed the club as a whole, that they'll be playing in one of the most modern and fancy stadiums in the world in the Championship. But the way things are going and the way that they're running the club, it looks likely that that might happen.
Frank Lampard has had the time to adjust to his squad and mould them in his image.
And then he got sacked in January, having done basically nothing to mould the team whatsoever.
In 12th place is going to be Wolves.
So close to being my first accurate prediction of the entire video. So damn close. They were one place off. I mean, again, it didn't look likely that I was going to be really close at the start of the season with the start that they made, with Bruno Lage obviously being dismissed relatively early on. But then Julian Lopetegui came in, moulded the squad in his image, and ultimately got them playing some pretty decent football and managed to keep their heads above the water, well, very comfortably, actually. But now, of course, come the question marks. Ruben Neves has openly stated that he wants to play Champions League football. His contract is expiring this summer, and they have so many issues now with financial fair play that it looks likely that they won't be able to back Lopetegui in the transfer market as much as he would like. So this Wolves project does look like it's caving in on itself again.
Jimenez could return to his absolute stellar best.
He didn't score a single goal this season, and Wolves only scored 31 goals in the Premier League, the fewest out of any team in the division, and 5 fewer than Erling Haaland.
In 11th place, I'm going to go with Aston Villa.
Aston Villa in the 11th. I mean, to be fair, like, if Steven Gerrard had stayed at the club for that long, this would have been an even worse prediction than it is right now. They might have even got relegated. I mean, Gerrard just lost his head completely whilst in charge, and then Unai Emery comes in and transforms them and takes the squad, which at its core is a phenomenal squad. You know, Leon Bailey, Emi Buendia, Ollie Watkins, Tyrone Mings, Ezri Konsa, etc., etc. All fantastic players just waiting for a good manager to guide them forward. And it shows how good Unai Emery is. He took them from a relegation battle and just outside the relegation zone to Europa Conference League spot next season, and playing some fantastic football along the way.
Steven Gerrard has come in as manager, and he's had a bit of time to adjust to his squad, much like Lampard has had at Everton.
And look how well both of those stints turned out.
I don't think Gerrard is going to have a terrible season. I don't think he'll be sacked.
I don't think Gerrard will be sacked. This was an awful Villa prediction by any means. I think 11th is very reasonable at the start of the season, but with that sentence alone, it's just turned into one.
Kicking off the top half is going to be Leicester.
Kicking off the relegation zone, not the top half, is going to be Leicester. I mean, they just sleptwalked. They just sleptwalked to relegation, and by the time they realised that relegation was a genuine threat, it was too late. There's so much uncertainty lingering over the club. You know, their owners having lost basically, I think it was 66% of their overall value during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of their players, likes of Tielemans, Evans, Paredes as well, out of contract in the summer. Maddison out of contract next year. Jamie Vardy getting on and dropping off his standards significantly. Kasper Schmeichel departing. Wesley Fofana departing, and not being able to replace them adequately enough, especially Schmeichel. I mean, you could barely replace him, but they didn't even sign a goalkeeper to fill his shoes. And ultimately, this concoction of all of those things just combined to mean that they are the second Premier League champions to be relegated. They only won it 7 seasons ago. They were playing Europa League football last season, and now look where they are. They're back in the Championship. It's really sad. It's really sad. We all want to see Leicester do well, considering the underdog story that they had. But I guess there were signs last season, and ultimately those signs have, turned into a full-on catastrophe. And now they're back in the second tier.
My second bold call of this video is the team I've put in 9th. And I think it's going to be Crystal Palace.
Yeah, again, I can see where I was coming from this one. Patrick Vieira did a great job in his first season, and it looked likely that the likes of Eberici Eze, Michael Olise, Mark Gahey as well would just push on in their second season and become stellar players. And obviously Olise and Eze both have, but they've only really come into form, sadly, after Vieira departed in March, or was sacked in March, and Roy Hodgson then came back in. I must admit, I lost a little bit of respect for Palace, and that they were going for a project and then decided to just completely abandon it in favour of their ex, essentially. Ultimately, it proved successful. They avoided relegation. Hodgson had a phenomenal end to the season, got the players firing, and ultimately sent them right back up to 12th, which is just the most Crystal Palace of Crystal Palace positions. I don't know how many times they've finished in 12th over the last 10 years, but it must be at least 3 or 4. I mean, again, I haven't checked, but it just seems like Crystal Palace are just the most 12th place side. Where they go with that managerial appointment will determine how well they do next season. If they go down the Hodgson route, they might be in a bit of trouble, but if they go down the Vieira route, then, well, maybe they might push on and get into the top half next season.
In 8th place, and the team who just missed out on European qualification, I reckon it's going to be West Ham.
Well, they might not miss out on European qualification if they win the Conference League final next week, but another team that have had a bit of a drop-off, they finished in 14th, 6 places lower than I predicted them. That first half of the season wasn't really very good, and up until about February, they really were deep in the conversation to be relegated, and eventually they managed to get their heads together, I think that was the thing that they realised earlier, especially than Leicester, for example, that they really were in a relegation battle and potentially sleepwalking their way to relegation, and got their heads in gear, won a few games, and ultimately got to that 40-point mark and ended up in 14th.
They might focus on trying to win the Conference League in order to get in the Europa League, especially if their league form takes a slight turn for the worse.
To be fair, I did call that. I think they have basically focused on trying to win the Conference League to get into the Europa League, and that has been to the detriment of their league form. I think that was actually a correct call, but I didn't expect it to be at that great a sacrifice to their league form, and I don't think anyone would have as well. But then again, I don't know how many people would have expected West Ham to get to the Conference League final in the first place, so they're still doing very, very well, but it's just that their league form this season just tumbled.
The team who will pit West Ham to a European spot is Newcastle.
No, they were so far ahead of West Ham and ended up qualifying for the Champions League. Never mind the Europa Conference League, never mind the Europa League, they are in the Champions League. What a job Eddie Howe's done. Of course he's had loads of money to play with, of course he has, and that will forever be subject to scrutiny, as it is with my club. Don't you worry, I'm not disregarding that whatsoever, but the way that they've got their money will forever be subject to scrutiny. However, they've spent it so well. Sven Botman, what a player he's been. Alexander Isak really coming into form, especially during the second half of the season. Bruno Guimaraes last season, Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn, all players that have made such pivotal contributions to Newcastle getting in the Champions League. But most importantly of all, Eddie Howe has taken the players that were at the club and made them brilliant. Miguel Almiron, especially with his purple patch in the first half of the season. Joe Linton becoming one of the best box-to-box midfielders in the Premier League, if not the world. Fabian Schär, one of the best defenders of the season.
The revolution is a go on Tyneside.
More a go than I realised.
I don't think they can break the Big Six wall just yet.
They smashed through that Big Six wall. They absolutely smashed through it. Yes, they were helped by a couple of big teams having terrible seasons, but a League Cup final and Champions League football, it's the best season that Newcastle have had in 20 plus years. And it looks likely that this is only the beginning.
In 6th place, it's going to be Arsenal, I think.
Oh no, Arsenal in 6th. They were literally top of the league for basically the entire season.
I think the squads around them are still slightly stronger.
I think that point does still stand. I think they have one of the weakest squad depths out of the so-called Big Six, especially when you could tell that when Saliba went out injured and Rob Holding and Jakob Kivior sadly just weren't up to the task of replacing him at centre-back, and that was one of the big reasons why Arsenal's season ended up collapsing the way that it did. However, to come from the disappointment, the bitter disappointment of bottling Champions League football to being the Premier League leaders for 248 days and giving Manchester City an almighty run for their money is testament to the amazing job that Mikel Arteta is doing and the emergence, or certainly coming into being, of so many of their star players. Saliba, Saka, Ødegaard, Zinchenko, what a player he proved to be. I mean, we knew how good he was at Man City, but given that a regular starting role, he has flourished and become one of the best players in the Premier League at left back, or certainly one of the best left backs in the league, if not the world. And now they really do look set to be a perennial title challenger, which is remarkable given where they came from last season. 50 points in the first half of the season is incredible, but then 34 points in the second half of the season meant that they ended up finishing in 2nd.
In 5th place, I think it's going to be a huge drop-off for Chelsea.
A huge drop-off for Chelsea to come in 5th. They had an even bigger drop-off than anyone could ever have imagined. 12th place, 44 points, a minus goal difference with £600 million spent over 2 transfer windows on like 20 to 25 new players, and they couldn't even finish in the top half. I genuinely think this is the most embarrassing season in Premier League history. Forget Derby County's 11-point haul in 2007-08, forget Aston Villa or Huddersfield's meat relegations, because those were expected. This was not expected. This has been an absolute car crash and a joke of a season for Chelsea. 3 managers sacking Thomas Tuchel immediately after the transfer window, so he didn't have time to work with the players, with the myriad of players that the owners brought in. Then bringing in Graham Potter as this long-term ambition project before sacking him after 7 months, and then hiring Frank Lampard on a caretaker basis, who I think won like 1 game in charge and only scored 1 goal in April, the entirety of April, and that was a deflected strike that probably would have been saved had it not been deflected. It's an embarrassment. It's an absolute embarrassment, and the hierarchy at Chelsea must be looking at themselves thinking, why the hell did we sack Thomas Tuchel, and why the hell did we bring in a manager who sadly just wasn't cut out for that kind of role just yet? And with the number of players that they've brought in, I mean, they didn't exactly help his cause either. So they are by no means, I think they are basically the reasons why rather than the managers. But still, I knew something was off at Chelsea, but I don't think anyone knew just how off things were.
Something just seems wrong with Chelsea right now. I can't really quite put my finger on exactly what that is.
The ownership. That's what's wrong with them. Sacking a manager who won them the Champions League, bringing in a manager who clearly wasn't suited to work with 47,000 players, then sacking him after 7 months, and then bringing in their ex. £60 million in managerial payments this season, alongside the £600 million they spent on players over the course of the season. And they've come in 12th, 30 points worse off than last season. The most embarrassing season in Premier League history. No question.
In 4th place, and a huge improvement from last season, it's going to be Manchester United.
Damn all they had to do, all Newcastle had to do was not bottle third place, and they bottled third place. I mean, they can't really bottle third place because you still qualify for the Champions League group stage, so automatically be coming fourth. But come on, all you had to do was just stave off Man United and just win your last couple of games, and it would have been great. But no, you had to draw your last 2 games. Man United had to win their last few games, and so that means that United are now in third, and I still don't have an accurate prediction in this entire video. They got rid of the players that were causing problems within the squad and brought in a manager, well, apart from Cristiano Ronaldo, who obviously created more problems, but they brought in a manager who was well-placed and well-versed to deal with those problems. He got rid of the players he didn't need, most significantly, of course, Ronaldo, who they sacked after his explosive interview with Piers Morgan just before the World Cup. And this has probably been the best season that Man United have had in a very long time. They've won the League Cup. They've qualified for the FA Cup final. They're back in the Champions League. They've come in third with a really solid season. Admittedly, yes, they did lose 4-0 to Brentford, 6-3 to Man City, and 7-0, most spectacularly of all, to Liverpool. So there are still things that do need to be improved upon, and Ten Hag will look to improve them next season. But Casemiro coming in was a phenomenal signing. Lisandro Martinez as well in defence. Marcus Rashford being revitalised under Ten Hag.
But I think it'll be quite similar to when Louis van Gaal joined the club in 2014, whereby obviously they hadn't finished in the top 4 the season before, but then he takes them back into the top 4, just a season of like getting them back to where Man United think they belong. And then, unlike Van Gaal, in his second season, Ten Hag will really kick on and potentially challenge for the title.
And that's exactly what he's done. He's got them right back into where Man United believe that they belong, even with all the chaos with their potential takeover still lingering over them, with Sheikh Jassim and Jim Ratcliffe's bids still being very much in a kind of state of flux at the moment. But that's exactly what he's done. He's taken them back into the Champions League, back where Man United believe they belong. And so I've got that part of the prediction right. Will the next part preview from right next season? Let's see.
I'm going to go with Spurs, although admittedly it does hinge on 2 words. Antonio Conte.
Yeah, it did hinge on those 2 words. It also hinges on 6 more words. It's the history of the Tottenham. Abysmal. Again, abysmal. I don't like Rory James. I don't really like him at all. But he made a very good point. I can't remember exactly where it was, but he made a very good point. If Spurs didn't have Harry Kane and Chelsea did, Chelsea would have finished in 8th and Spurs would have finished in 12th. But the difference was that Spurs had Harry Kane. 30 goals. In any other year, we would talk about him as the best player in the league. It just so happens that Erling Haaland had a freakish season. Well, not freakish season, but just an Erling Haaland season and took the league by storm. But Kane scored 30 goals. Basically the reason why Spurs were in contention for so much as Europa Conference League football right up until the final game of the season. I mean, it's just been a mess from start to finish. The recruitment was poor. Richarlison's barely done anything. Yves Bissouma even less. Conte, an explosive interview in, press conference after the Southampton 3-3 draw in March, which led to ultimately his contract being terminated. I'm pretty certain he basically wanted out from the start of the season, and it finally manifested itself in March when he just lost his rag completely. And it's just been an absolute shambles. They sacked an interim manager. How do you sack an interim manager? That doesn't happen. Like, they sacked a manager who isn't even the head coach or a manager. I don't understand it. Just, oh my God. Just an absolute piss poor season from Spurs. And there are the question marks. Will Harry Kane stay? As there always are every year. Will Harry Kane stay? Will Harry Kane go? And, well, surely now, he has to. It sucks. I don't want him to leave Spurs in a way, but I just think he has to right now.
Well, it's destiny, isn't it? I mean, the last time Liverpool lost the league by 1 point to Manchester City, they then stormed the league in 2019-20. And whilst I don't think they'll storm the league this season, I do think that they'll win it.
I didn't get a single... This is the first season I didn't get a single accurate prediction right. I thought Liverpool were going to win the league. They finished in 5th. They're not even in the Champions League. Never mind the champions. They're not even in the Champions League next season. They're in the Europa League. An unbelievable drop-off for them. Another team that just fell off the pace spectacularly. Van Dijk, a significant downgrade on last season. He hasn't really returned to his pre-ACL injury best. Fabinho, another massive drop-off from him. The midfield completely decimated with injuries and just not really up to scratch. Trent Alexander-Arnold, his well-publicised struggles during the first half of the season, especially defensively. All of these things just led to Liverpool slipping all the way down to 5th and being no way near title challengers basically from week one.
The new striker obviously coming in with Erling Haaland, very, very high profile signing, but that might mean that City have to readapt their game slightly.
To be fair, they did have to readjust their style of play, and for a long period of time it looked as though it wasn't really going to prove successful and it was going to be a bit of a challenge to adapt to Haaland's game. And then it clicked. And clicked spectacularly.
They might try to focus on just getting that Champions League trophy.
Well, they have focused on getting the Champions League trophy and still ended up with the Premier League title and an FA Cup final. So it just shows how amazing a turnaround it's been, especially since February. And they do now have a chance of getting that treble.
I think Liverpool are going to be the champions. As I say, it almost feels like destiny they'll win either the Premier League or the Champions League, if not both.
I do understand, again, it's like they were so close to winning the league last season, and the last time that happened, they absolutely barnstormed everyone and blitzed everything and won the league by 18 points, I think it was. They are going to be in the Europa League next season, and with the teams around them still strengthening and arguably in a much better place than them, it does look likely that they might miss out on Champions League football again next season, but there's still pre-season left to go and of course the summer transfer window, etc. So that could age very badly, but it's not exactly out of the question either. Right, so I've done the maths. As I said earlier on, my target I had to beat was 68, or at the very least last season's total of 70. I got 78 points. 78. Dreadful. But that's the whole point of predictions. They're just a bit of fun. Like, obviously, you can't tell. I'm never going to say, like, I'm right in anything, because you can't be right unless you are a clairvoyant, which very, very, very few people, if any, are. So, it's not exactly like I'm annoyed about it or anything. This is the whole point of predictions. It's just they're a bit of fun. It's just a light-hearted bit of fun that everyone does at the start of the season. So it's not exactly like it's something to be ashamed of, because you can't tell what a Premier League season is going to look like at the end of it. There are so many twists and turns that can happen during the course of the campaign. But yeah, 78 points is, let's be real, not a very good return.
Now we move on to the second part of the video, which is my 3 big predictions for the Premier League teams or players or whatever it might be. And the first of them is that Spurs will actually win a trophy.
No. 2-0 trophy winners in Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte couldn't do it. Who can?
My second bold call in this video is that Erling Haaland will not be the top goal scorer this season, or even come close.
52 goals, 36 league goals, breaking the Premier League record for goals in a season. Second in the all-time top flight seasons in terms of scoring the most goals in a single season in all competitions, only behind Dixie Dean's 63 in 1927-28. Not even come close to the top scorer, I said. Let's just move on.
My third bold call is that Harry Maguire will have a renaissance under Erik ten Hag.
16 games this season. Dropped his first choice after 2 horrible performances in the first 2 games of the season. He's going to leave United this summer, no question. They were 3 bold predictions at the end of the day, and all of them were about as spectacularly wrong as you could possibly be.
In Ligue 1, I'm going to go with PSG because, obviously...
Wow, predicting PSG to win Ligue 1. What a footballing oracle of wisdom, insight and knowledge I well and truly am.
In the Bundesliga, I'm going to go with Bayern Munich because, again, obviously...
It wasn't as obviously as it proved to be. I mean, Dortmund had it. They had it. And then they absolutely blew it on the final day.
For Serie A, which is the most difficult league to call in the entire of the Europe's top 5 leagues, I think, I'm going to go with Juventus.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah, they've been deducted 10 points for their transfer activities. Their entire board has resigned. And they might not even be in the Europa League or Europa Conference League next season. Fair play to Napoli. Surpassed all expectations. But what a shoddy prediction this is.
In La Liga, I think Real are going to hang on to that crown in spite of Barcelona's incredible transfer policy, despite the fact they have about minus 50 pence and a packet of Starburst in their bank account.
I mean, they still do have minus 50 pence, even less than minus 50 pence. Maybe the packet of Starburst is still there, but you know what's also there? A La Liga title. Another one spectacularly wrong.
For the Championship, I'm going to go with Norwich, even though I know that Burnley are expected to win or have been predicted to win by a couple of people. But I think even though they are in the Vincent Company, they've lost so many key players, and Norwich are just a pretty well-run club.
Yeah, Norwich didn't even make the playoffs, and Burnley stormed to the Championship title, getting more than 100 points. This video is ending horribly. I mean, this whole video, the whole predictions have just been a shambles, and like, I've only got one thing left to go, and I've got absolutely nothing bang on so far. So this, apart from Southampton to be relegated, this is the only thing I've got right so far in this entire video. So can my Champions League winners, who I predicted, save me?
And for the Champions League, I'm going to go with Liverpool.
No, even that prediction can't save me. Liverpool out in the round of 16 to Real Madrid, and it's between Man City and Inter for the Champions League. What an awful set of predictions that was. See you next year.